What is going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. It's your favorite host of your favorite show, Medical Sales Live, except today we got a special one. Today we are doing a network grand rounds. That's right, we're doing the first public network grand rounds. Why? Because I love you. Even if you're not in my program, I still got love for you. And as I do this, before I introduce my guests, you know what's the most important part of the show. Now, some of you may have guessed it. Actually, I see the comments already. To comment what city you're joining in from, that's number one. The second part is because of the wonderful platform on LinkedIn, I have to just double check to make sure that my audio and video is coming through. And look at that. Maybe it's because of the good luck that our guest brings, but everything's working out fine. So let's just see who's joining in. So if you're joining live or you're watching this on demand, hey, that's okay too. Go ahead and comment what city you're joining in from. We're coming to you live from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And guess what? Zero audio-visual problems. That means it's going to be a great show, even better than usual. So let's see who we got joining in today. Tarek Solomon. Tarek joining in from the LBC. What's up, Tarek? Good to see you as always. We got Matt Kramer from Minnesota. Oh, God. You know, if there's a dad joke that I appreciate, it's a dad joke like that. That is fantastic. Matthew Kramer, thank you for joining. We got Maggie Hayes from Tampa, Florida. Hey, Maggie. Hope you're doing well in Tampa. Alexander Matisse joining from New York. Alexander Matisse is a member of our Career Accelerator program. The guy is a killer up in New York. When this guy interviewed for the program, he interviewed in the middle of Manhattan traffic in New York City, and he actually got in. Alexander, great to see you. Matthew, my son/assistant, he is, I think he's hit the bar early. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, so I think he's having some milk right now. So, fantastic. So, wanted to welcome you all to Network Grand Rounds. So, what is Network Grand Rounds? Network Grand Rounds is a private event that I hold for the members of my program, the Medical Sales Network Effects program, where we invite experts and KOLs to talk about really specific topics that you really can't find this content anywhere else. And so my guest today is a good friend of mine, somebody who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And I wanted to do this publicly because I do this mainly, well, you know, I got a family to feed, but I also do this to provide value. And this is such an important topic. I wanted a lot of people to have access to this. And so let me bring that banner up. Here we go. The topic today is, how does a medical sales rep provide value to the physician and actually help them grow their practice, right? Because every sales rep wants to do that. Like, they want to be a consultant, right? But there's a way to be a consultant and a way to be a royal pain in the ass. And unfortunately, med reps, unbeknownst to themselves, become a royal pain in the ass. So we have our special guest to bring on. So who is our guest today? Our guest is Dr. Sandra Weitz. Dr. Sandra Weitz is a board-certified pain management physician who built a thriving multi-physician practice down in the South, grew it to a sizable amount, and had an exit. Right? And she did this leveraging one specific thing that they do not teach you in medical school, which is the business of medicine. She was so good at it, you know, that, to be honest with you, she really does not need to be working right now. But because of how frustrating it is for her to see physicians just absolutely suck at the business of medicine, she decided to launch her own endeavor called the Practice Building MD, where she teaches private practice physicians the business of medicine, from contracts to billing to how to grow your practice and more. She's been doing this for a few years now. She started in 2020, and I've been fortunate enough to sort of sit and watch the community go from, I think, 10 or 20 people back in 2020 to now hundreds of people. It might be in the thousands, all private practice physicians. So with that being said, let me bring on my special guest, Dr. Sandra Weitz. Sandy, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. Thank you so much for having me, Omar.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity because I think docs don't know how to talk to med reps, and I think med reps have a hard time figuring out what to say to docs. And so I think that if we can create a conversation, it will help both sides.
I completely agree, because there is this bridge where there's plenty of physicians I know who they have that one rep that they love, that they trust. And many of them would say, I wish they were all like this, right? So I think there's a way to do that. Before we get started, I just want to go ahead and plug for those who are medical sales reps. Number one is if you work with a physician, they own a private practice, have them go to the practicebuildingmd.com, which is Dr. Weitz's practice, or not practice, that's her website, right? She has some great courses on there, including a private community, and she may or may not regret this later, but I'm just going to say it. She told me before coming on, she said, if any medical sales rep needs help, she's happy to speak with you directly. So if you are interested, shoot her a message. Is LinkedIn Messenger okay for you, Dr. Weitz?
Absolutely. You can also just send me an email, drweitz at drsandраweitz.com. You can find me on Facebook. Any way you want to communicate with me works. But my motivation is if I can help a med rep get into an office and communicate what you have to offer that doctor, it's only going to help that doctor. And one of the things that Omar and I talk about kind of back and forth is the fact that a lot of doctors think that med reps are a pain in certain body parts. Okay? And I'm sure many of you know this. They don't want to see you.
And maybe that's a good place to start. Why do physicians dislike med reps? Can we start there and kind of start at ground level zero? Do you think that's a good place to start?
Sure. It's very simple. Med reps have a tendency, not all, some are magnificent, but there's, it only takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch. And there's a group of med reps that show up to clinic unannounced, okay? Don't schedule an appointment, demand to come to the back, hang out at the nurse's station, or camp out in the physician office in the back office, waiting as if you have nothing else to do but to see them. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I have to fit you in somehow. Then when you do get in front of the physician, you don't actually talk to what their pain points are. You give them some brochure that they could have looked up online, or you tell them some piece of information that is the standard canned, company information that's not really necessarily either new or applicable to them. All right. And you tell them things like, my numbers are down. Can you do more of this? Or can you refer more of that? All right. Instead of, hey, how can we be collaborative? And so they see you coming and they go, oh my God, it's one more thing, one more person that I have to deal with when I'm already trying to juggle 20 things. Now, I'm sure there are some of you who are listening to me thinking to yourself, oh, that's not me at all. The problem is that it's more of you than you think. And all it takes is that one rep that the entire staff hates, that when another rep comes, especially if you're the new rep, everybody already starts out going, oh my God, it's another rep. So that's it in a nutshell. And I'm very blunt, so I apologize in advance.
No, I mean, as the saying goes, the truth hurts, but it'll set you free, right? I feel like a lot of the med rep behavior we see today is essentially perpetuated from our great grandmothers and grandfathers of medical sales past, where this behavior worked, but it worked for a good reason. Because back then, and this is even like 10 years ago, medical sales was a lot more, it was different. They were actually standalone private hospitals. And so you can walk into the physician's lounge, kick your feet up and hang out and watch TV. Physician walks in and be like, hey doc, I was just in the area, walking by. I noticed you have 3 total hips today. What a coincidence. I got 3 gizmos just for total hips in my bag. Like, what are the odds, right? Do you want to try it? You would go to the surgery. The doctor's like, yeah, let me give it a try. Gives it a try. It's like, yeah, I'll try more of these in the future. And just like that, it's like, great, I'll send the bill to the hospital and you're done. We don't live in that world anymore. Right?
Not at all.
Yeah. So what's the first step to transition out of that so you become less of a pain and more of an asset?
Well, I think the first thing, and this is very simple, make an appointment to actually see that physician or physician group. talk to the doctors, talk to the practice manager. Hey, when is the most convenient time for me to actually come and get FaceTime with your providers? Okay. Because if you make an appointment to see me, and it may be before clinic, it may be at 7 o'clock in the morning, it may be at the end of the day, it may be during lunch, except that most doctors don't actually take lunch, or if they do take lunch, they're either running to the hospital or they're doing administrative work or they're finishing up seeing their morning clinic patients. So it's usually going to be at the beginning or the end of the day. But make an appointment and come with specific things to talk about. But understand that you need to actually think about this as a relationship. And I would encourage physicians to do the same thing, right? This is a team. So if you're coming to talk to a doctor, bring them useful information that they can't otherwise get, or something that's truly new and different. Don't be there all the time, but also ask them what they need help with. Understand their practice. The more you understand their pain points, the more likely they're going to embrace you and basically make you part of their team. Or, yeah, you would like them to do more of those total hips, to come back to your example. Okay, but maybe they just don't have that many referrals for total hips. Maybe they're looking to grow that part of the practice. Where can you come in to help them? All right. You're out in the community. You may be talking to other doctors. You may be talking to other reps. Right. Do you know of a bit maybe, you had coffee at Starbucks because all reps hang out at some place because you guys don't have an office. So you tend to do your reports someplace. Right. And I was telling Omar one day, when I lived in Baton Rouge, you would go to Starbucks and you would see reps from every different company, whether it was pharmaceutical reps across different specialties, device reps, but they all hang out, they all talk to each other, and they know all of the doctors in the area. They know who's good, they know who's bad, they know who's busy, who's not. And so if you can bring information to that physician, I'm not talking about proprietary information, I'm talking about just kind of word on the street. What do you know? How maybe they can market themselves to get more of those hip replacement patients. What can we do to help them identify, social media posts? What can we do? If you're in an OR with them and doing a case, can you video them and have there be some, shared social media post? How do you bring your device or your drug or whatever it is to them, but help them not only in terms of, hey, use my product, but hey, use me and my resources so that we grow this practice together? Because if you grow the practice together, you know what, your numbers are going to go up as well as their numbers are going to go up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, I want to. And by the way, for those who are watching, please, if you have a question for Dr. Weitz, just drop it in the comments. If you don't have a question, that's okay too. Start slamming that emoji like button, because we want more people to join this broadcast. And we might set a record for today, because I haven't had these numbers in a long time. But you're attracting quite a crowd already, which is fantastic. So here's the thing. Here's my question to you, Dr. Weitz. So let's pretend I'm a medical salesperson. A lot of times when you reach out to the office, you kind of get stonewalled, right? Because of past rep behavior. And so sometimes they don't let you set an appointment, right? And I think maybe that might be one reason why some reps decide, like, okay, I'm just going to go there physically. In the event that you're getting stonewalled for an appointment, do you have any recommendation of how they can overcome that? I mean, what are some things they can do,
Yeah, there are a number of things. First of all, in today's day and age, social media has broken down that barrier that the practice manager or the front desk puts up, because you can always reach out to a physician if they're on LinkedIn. Again, don't spam them, right? Don't nag them, don't harass them, because you're only going to, make them think, yeah, okay, I really don't want to talk to this person. But send them a message and say, hey, I would like to help you grow your practice. I'm the new rep or I'm the rep for such and such. I think there are a number of things that we can do to work together as a team, right? And this is where sending them a concise message of not only what device do you want to talk to them or drug, but also what you want to talk to them about their practice will help you. Same thing
Ah,
with same thing with a Facebook message. And then, I'm old. The old fashioned write a handwritten note and mail it to them actually still works. And the reason is because it means that you're actually committed to making an effort to helping them. Again, if you send them a brochure with your latest device and say and your card attached to it, that's not going to get anybody's attention.
it gets
Okay,
it gets.
it
I'm just
gets
gonna
thrown
let
in the mail,
as this
in
it
the
just
garbage.
in the garbage. Yeah, it's no different than like when I get, and it's funny, Dr. White's, because like there's so many market. They're not marketing department. They're product management departments that do marketing as a hobby at these startups or these big medtech companies, where they put so much time and money and effort into this brochure, thinking like, oh, because I've been part of these committees, like the wording and this and design, and it literally it's like this is exactly what happens. It's like, oh, that's cool, into the garbage, because there's like 5 or 6 other ones just like it. It's just like when I get my mail here. There's 2 piles of mail for us here in this house. There's stuff that's actually important that needs to get open, and then the crap that gets thrown out.
Well, see, I'm even worse than you because I go to the doctor. Hey, do you need an appointment card? No, I already put it in my phone. All right. If I go someplace and they want to give me a brochure, I'm like, I can just look up your information online. I don't need it.
Yeah,
I don't need another piece of
and
paper in my office, in my house. Enough already.
yeah, same
So,
at conferences. Don't you? I hate like when they try and give me stuff. I'm like, please don't give me anything. And the solution now. I'm actually going to go to a cervical spine conference tomorrow in San Diego. The solution now is not to get rid of that. It's like, oh well, instead of like a brochure like this big, we're just going to make it smaller, as if that makes it better. Like that's. We have a question real quick from Alexander Matisse, who's a young and a very talented sales rep up in the New York City area. So Alex says, do you believe these ideas can be applied to physicians that are not in private practice? If so, how? It's a great question, Alex. Dr. Weitz, what's your answer?
yeah, I think the pressures are the same whether you're in private practice or not, because ultimately, well, I shouldn't say that. In some situations, there are physicians who work for the large box, and certainly in New York City, there are a lot of physicians who work for large groups, large hospitals, who have a certain number of RVUs they have to hit. They already feel like they are pressured. All right. But even so, a lot of them, their payer mix, it affects their RVUs and their contracts. Okay. And so while they may not recognize it, and this is really a problem, Alexander, because the employed physician who works for the large box does not always understand the business of medicine, and the fact that even as an employed physician, that changing the payer mix of the patient they see may actually ultimately give them a higher dollar per WRVU, and therefore they can negotiate for a higher contract. They may or may not appreciate your help in terms of, hey, I can change your practice. And that's where you're understanding the business of medicine and really being able to communicate, hey, these are the ways that we can make your practice better. Because if I can see the same number or fewer patients and get paid more per patient because all of a sudden we're not attracting, let's say Medicaid, but we're actually attracting a fee-for-service, high-paying payer mix, that was a tremendous value add to that doctor, regardless of whether they're employed or whether they're in private practice. I think the other thing is that, really going to talk to those physicians who are employed by the big entity and trying to understand what are their pain points. Okay. I mean, it's like everything else in life. Don't tell me you have a problem. Tell me the solution. Okay. And these docs, and Omar talked about it at the beginning of this, that part of the reason that I started teaching physicians the business of medicine actually came from the fact that I was in physician Facebook groups and they're all complaining. I'm burnt out. I have to see too many patients. I have no control over my life. None of that is true. Okay. Or maybe some of it is true, but there are things about it that they can change. And if you understand that we need, and this is just a general statement, if you understand that we need to translate from the woe is me to the here's the solution to a problem, or here are some possible solutions, that's when you can actually change something. So I think that for you to be able to get in that door, long-winded answer, but I think for you to be able to get in that door, you need to actually start to talk to them about where are the hiccups? What are the things that are difficult for you? What can I do to help make it better? I'll give you an example. One of the things sometimes with device reps or devices in general, we want to do this procedure, can't do the procedure, requires prior authorization, and the staff is overwhelmed. And understand that, especially if it's a big box, that staff doesn't actually work for you. It works for the entity. So you don't actually have a lot of control. And a lot of physicians get really frustrated because I'll come back to that total hip for a second. Okay. Well, I'll give you a better example that I know very well: spinal cord stimulators. Okay?
Oh, that's a hot topic. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And one that is near and dear to my heart. But we'll talk about spinal cord stimulators for a second. I want to do this spinal cord stimulator trial. Okay. I need to get approval for that spinal cord stimulator trial. Depending on the insurance, they are constantly changing the rules in terms of, what ICD-10 is covered, not covered, what you have to have tried before, what you have to have failed. If I work for the large box, okay, I submit that I want to do the spinal cord stimulator trial. It goes off into what I would describe to you as a black box. And somebody over there is supposedly working that prior authorization. Okay. You, the rep, are not going to get credit for my trial until I do that trial, no matter how many of them I try and schedule. So if you understand that's where the roadblock is, a lot of companies, and my favorite for spinal cord stimulators, and if any of my reps are listening, I'm going to give a plug for Boston Scientific. They went out of their way to get their billing folks to coordinate with my billing folks to get that prior auth. And by making that process much more seamless, you know what? We did more cases. But for us, that was a roadblock. So if you can understand the pain points and help somebody address it, and it may not necessarily just be financial, it just may be navigating the system, they're going to be a whole lot happier to see you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, I got a message from somebody about my audio, so I'm going to change something in a second. But to kind of keep going on that same topic, if you're a rep working at a company, and for those who are on Zoom, Todd, thanks for a heads up. I got your message, so I'll make the adjustment right now. But for the rep, let's say the rep that's at a new company and they're not at a Boston Scientific, they're at some company. And actually, here, let me unplug here. Okay, should be fine. Dr. Weitz, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to take this off. For the rep who's at a company where they were not smart enough to figure this out, and there are, believe it or not, plenty of companies that come up with great technologies, and they did not think, hey, figuring out the prior authorization part is going to be kind of important because that'll kind of determine whether adoption happens or not. But for a rep, let's say that they're at a company run by a moron, which happens. What can the rep do, like a young Alexander Matisse? What can he do if his company, which I'm not saying his company is this, by the way, but hypothetically didn't have that figured out? What kind of things can they do to make themselves more of a value add to the physician for that adoption?
Well, one thing they can do, it is not that hard to figure out where the hiccup is with prior authorization. They themselves can just sit down with the billing company, the billing person who's ever doing the prior auth, and say, can you pull the past 10 one prior auths, and where's the hiccup? Is it an ICD-10? Because a lot of times the physician just doesn't have time to go back and think about the why am I getting the denials. I hate to say this, but unless you would have a physician who's totally in tune with the business of medicine, a lot of times they order stuff, it goes off in the queue, and they have no idea that, you know what, that person actually never got scheduled until 3 months later. The person comes back and says, oh, I'm still waiting to have my spinal cord stimulator trial. All right. So that rep can actually just go to whoever does prior auths and say, hey, do you have any prior auths that are pending for my procedure, my device, my whatever? And if so, what are the issues? Because if they educate themselves about what the issue is, anybody can call Blue Cross and say, I'd like the rules with regard to what is required, because all of those rules are public information. All right. You know, even if you are, whether you're a patient, whether you're a rep, whether you're a physician's office, bottom line is the definition of what, like, for example, with Medicare, okay, what's medically necessary? What's the local carrier determination, the LCD? What's the ICD-10s that are covered for your thing? What, you know, for example, let's say you want to do that spinal cord stimulator trial. Well, historically, it had to be for failed back syndrome, or it had to be for somebody who has a chronic lumbar radiculopathy. Okay, does that person have those diagnoses? If the person never had a back surgery, right, then what do we have an EMG? Do we have a this? And be that liaison back to the doctor. Now, this is where trying to establish that team comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
All right, where it's a communication between you and that physician. All right, hey, doc, or I'll backtrack. Hey, Alexander, I scheduled that device with you, or that procedure, or whatever Alexander sells. Alexander makes a note. Hey, I got one of those, right? Because especially for a device rep, drugs are easy because the pharmacies keep track of that. But for devices, you only know once it's on the OR schedule. Do you really have any clue when it's out in purgatory waiting to be authorized? No. The only way you know is if the physician tells you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say, hey, Alexander, I scheduled X, Y, and Z, and Alexander knows that I'm only 2 weeks out in my OR schedule, and he doesn't see that somebody's calling him to say, hey, we have a case, all right, then Alexander goes to my authorization person and says, hey, Dr. White says she scheduled a case with me. What's the status of this? And then come back to me and say, hey, did you know we haven't gotten the prior auth? Because then either you tell me why I didn't get the prior auth, or at minimum, I go back to my billing people and say, or who's ever doing my prior auth, and say, how come we didn't get this? Do we need more documentation? What do we need to make this happen? Two things end up happening from that. One, it's a team. Two, both you and the physician benefit, because obviously they use your device, physician has a case, but more importantly, it improves patient care. All right. And at the end of the day, you know, yes, I'm all about making the most money that you can make, but it's making the most money you can make while doing the right thing and providing stellar patient care. You are not there to, you know, basically make money only. One would hope that one becomes, you know, a medical device rep or a pharmaceutical rep because you really like or want to take care of patients and you want people to have good outcomes. Otherwise, why don't you become like a car salesman, right? It's because you fundamentally have an interest in this, or I'm ascribing feelings to you. I apologize, but that's what I would hope. Similarly, I would hope that all physicians go into this because they too want to take care of patients and the best care of patients possible. So if you can help somebody basically to get that patient on the books that much faster, all right, for something that is medically necessary, it's a win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, honestly, like when I was a rep, the thing that actually took my career to the next level was not specifically marketing, but learning how to help the physicians market the technology to attract the patients. I mean, terms like catchment area, like you should know what that is as a rep, and figuring out like, okay, where's most of the patient volume coming from? And when you map that out, then you can figure out, oh, you know what? We shouldn't be doing a patient educational event in this area because these patients come to us anyway. We should do it in this other area, right? And that's actually how you get cases. The one thing, and we have a great question by Matthew Kramer. Matt, your question's up next. One thing that drives me nuts, when you're a medical sales rep, you have a number to hit. Like, of course. And the way I see it is like when you're trying to get more cases, you're trying to help that many more people. Is it nice that, in that same process you make money? Yeah, sure, that's fine. But what drives me nuts, and specifically I'm going to pick on the orthopedic reps, is they'll pick up the phone and be like, hey, doc, it's Q4. I need help. I need to hit my number. Can you do a few more cases? Like, the doctor's not going to pull cases out of thin air. The better thing is to call and be like, hey, I got to hit my number for Q4. Here's what I figured out we can do that might give us a better chance. Do you mind if I book you for a dinner with these referring physicians? Do you mind if I book you for this patient educational event? I'll get the funding for it, right? And if I can't get the funding, like, there was times where I think there was one time like my company couldn't pay for something and it was like $200. I was like, screw it, I'll foot that bill, So I think as a rep, if you want more cases, don't put it on the physician to figure out how to do it because that's not their job, nor do they care,
Well, and I'll give you an example of how you can do something for free. Because in reality, the days of, hey, the drug rep or the device rep is going to take me out to dinner, I think are over. Because if you think about it, first of all, if you've ever lived that life, you always saw the same group of people at those dinners.
Isn't it funny?
It's like, it's only like a limited number of docs who go, and most of them are people trying to escape their home life. Okay. Personally, I never went. I had 3 little kids. All right. And I didn't need somebody to pay for my dinner. All right. So the world has changed. Today with Zoom, as you see from this technology, you can arrange a talk about that new device that you want that doctor to use for Q4 and invite a bunch of his colleagues or her colleagues. Your chance of getting people to actually show up is much higher because you know what? I can watch Zoom while I'm making dinner. And it doesn't mean that I have to drive a half hour to get there, figure out where I'm going to park, sit through 2 hours because, the talk is a half hour, but then you actually have to sit through dinner and schmooze with these people, some of whom you like, some of whom you don't like. And then you first have to go home to your family. So if it's a 30-minute Zoom, you're done.
Yeah. And, Matthew, thanks. I'm going to bring up Matthew's question. And here's the other thing. I absolutely love that because one thing that, forget about physicians, anybody loves, people like to see their peers and everything. But yeah, look, where I live, even if there is some kind of event happening down the street, like it's a pain. It was a pain before I was married. It's a pain now that I'm married. And it's definitely a pain now that I have a kid. Like I have better things to be doing. I love it when I can do these things and like I'm done. It's like, great, my family's right there. And if you're up, like, look, it's 2022. There's great technology out there. You can figure out a way to do like an Uber Eats thing, right? Just get the physician's address and be like, hey, we're going to have food delivered to you, right? Yeah. And a lot of people, this is the stupid pushback I get from some device companies. Like, well, if we do that, they might want to order more food for their family. I'm like, okay. I'm like, that cost would have already been there if you did this at a restaurant because you would have had to pay money for a certain level of spend just to book a room. So like, who cares? Just do it. So let me bring up Matthew's questions. We got Matthew's question. We got Gregory. And by the way, MedReps, I love you, but I try to make you guys better on this show. So when you ask your questions, try and make them more concise because when I bring them up, if they're too big, they will cover my face and Sandy's face. I know you want to cover my face, but like at least for my guests, I prefer not to cover their face, but we'll make this work. All right, here's Matthew's question. And actually, I think I can finagle this a little bit. Let's see. Well, that made it worse. Yep. All right, they're just going to see our eyes.
That's
Okay,
fine.
so let me read this for people who are listening. As someone who is very empathetic to stresses and time crunch of healthcare providers, and sometimes maybe overly so to the potential detriment of making a sales contact, what kind of advice do you have for a rep who is hyper aware of not wanting to come across as annoying or invasive or just another annoying rep, yet knows they need to make contact in a helpful manner? Which is a great question. And I will, Matt, I'm gonna I rewrote the question. Yeah, see, I was smart enough to do that. Here we go. So Matthew, great question. And Matthew's a great example of those kind of reps where he is very, very thoughtful about how do I engage with a physician? How do I do it in a good way? But you got to hit a number. Dr. Weitz, what's your advice to Matthew?
Well, I think in large part, we've actually already talked about some of this. I think, Matthew, the answer is not don't contact us. I think the answer is really understanding when I contact you, feel free to ask the doc, how much contact do you want? How much, what are your pain points? What can I do to help you? If you're actually there helping them, maybe you can do some research for them in terms of their market, in terms of their demographics, in terms of the payer mix in the community. What can you offer them that they're going to be eager to see you again, other than just telling them about whatever you're selling?
Absolutely.
If you can do that, then they're not going to view you as annoying. They're going to view you as basically free help. Okay,
that's 100% correct.
Otherwise, they have to hire somebody.
And you know what's funny? I never thought of this, and you made me realize this. That's part of the culture of medicine, because everybody. I mean, I remember before I went to medical school doing this. Every physician at some point did something for free in medicine, like to shadow a physician, to work in a lab or something. So this is like built into the culture of medicine. It's something that's appreciated. That's such a good point.
Well, and I think the other thing is that there are times where it's appropriate to say to somebody, how often do you want to see me? How often, and
ooh, that's a great question.
Well, and I'll come at it from the pharmaceutical perspective. There was a drug that shall remain nameless that I absolutely loved the rep. Okay. But I was writing a lot for the drug one way or the other because it was a great drug. And I said to the person, hey, unless you have a new program where I can get this drug for free for my patients who don't have adequate insurance, or you have something that is different, you don't have to come see me once every 3 months or every 6 months, because unless something changes, I'm going to write for your drug one way or the other. There are, if you haven't figured out, I'm blunt. I'm very blunt. There have been other drugs in my career where I've said to the rep, you don't need to bother to come back. Your drug does not work as well as the other 5 drugs on the market that do exactly the same thing. And your drug doesn't have a free drug program. So there is no version of this where I'm going to be writing for your drug no matter how many times you come to visit me. Okay. Now, most physicians, I don't think, are going to be that blunt with you. But if you start to have a relationship with them and understand kind of where they're coming from and how, ask them point blank, why do you use this over that? Okay. What can I do to make myself useful to you so that you want to use my X over somebody else's Y? All right. Unfortunately, and I'm going to tell you the God's honest truth, not all devices are created equal. Not all drugs are created equal. If you are unfortunate enough to work for a company that has a less stellar device than somebody else, then you have a higher uphill battle to climb, because ultimately one would hope that the physician is going to choose the best product. Now, can you overcome that? Yes, by helping them to understand how much more of a value add can you and that company bring, in spite of the fact that maybe your device is not quite as good as the other. I mean, If there's a huge discrepancy, then you're going to get the same response that the rep who had the drug that just was not it got. But if it's close and it's a matter of, you and another device that are, what and what, then it really boils down to, when I schedule this case, do I call you or do I call the other guy or woman? It really is, who do I have that relationship with? Who's part of my team? Who's really bringing something to the table beyond just their device? And this is really more of an OR related thing. How useful are you in the operating room? If you just put in, if you're just there and hand off that piece to be implanted, and you don't help troubleshoot, you're not really knowledgeable about, okay, what happens when there's a complication in the OR, because not every case goes perfectly. Hey, doc, maybe you could try doing this. All right. And I know that doctors have huge egos, and I know that sometimes they don't listen to you, but there are ways to gently suggest things. Okay. Also, there are other things like customer service, right? So I'll come back to my Boston Scientific example. I ended up using Boston Scientific exclusively for one reason and one reason only. And that is they were there for the trial to help educate the patient when we basically signed them up for the trial. They did the trial in the OR. They were very useful in terms of, hey, maybe you need a different guide wire, or I saw this when I did a case with Dr. So-and-so, and he was struggling in the same way. Maybe we should try this. Okay. They were there post-trial to basically program that patient. When the patient got implanted and the coverage, the spinal cord stimulation was not exactly where we needed, they came back and they reprogrammed that patient. Didn't matter how many times they had to come. They were available. They came with a smile. They were there the day that we said, hey, this patient's coming to clinic at X, Y, and Z time. I will tell you that I used other brands in my career. Never had that level of customer service for my patients.
And you know what? That's a really big, important thing I want to highlight. Greg, your question's up next, followed by Jackie. I think there's this loss of customer service and customer success. The one thing I'm very much obsessed with is like product adoption. How does it happen? How do you adopt a new product? And a big part of that, like, let's say, look, hate to say this, and again, the spine guys are going to get pissed, but it's true. Most spine screws are like pretty much the same. It's just like different colors for the most part. Like let's just be a screw is a screw. So how do you differentiate the level of customer service? And something that Dr. Weitz you mentioned that I really like is like, does the physician really feel like you're part of the team? Like, and this is a great heuristic to ask yourself, which is, if there's a case happening next week and I tell my doctor I'm not going to be there, somebody else can be covering, will your physician be pissed off? Like, will it genuinely make them irate and at least stressed out that you're not going to be there, right? That's a good indication. I mean, I remember, and I guess it was a good thing. It was kind of uncomfortable, but when I got my first promotion and I was leaving my territory, one of my surgeons and their spouse were really pissed off, and they made like my, like farewell dinner, like really awkward, because they kind of let my manager have it in front of me. But that just told me like, hey, I did a really good job being valuable to these people. And I think that's what you have to do. Let me bring up Greg's question. So we're going to do this two ways. One is that I'm going to bring up his comment, but then I reformatted the question. So for the med reps watching, get better about asking questions. All right, so here it is. So Greg says, yeah, usually before surgeon can book new product or device, the vendor has to gain surgeon support, then go through the hospital vendor and product value analysis committee process to get approval for the surgeon to then use it. Sometimes a VAC committee meets once every 3 months or so. What about the limits on vendors? Okay, so before I want Dr. Weitz to answer this, I want to here we go. I want to show you guys something, okay? Not to brag, but to prove that this can be done. All right, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Hold on. Let's see here. Chrome tab. Here we go. All right. And let me get rid of this banner here. Okay. So I just want to show this as a reminder. So like, not to brag, but I'm bragging a little bit. This was my pipeline back in 2020 when I was running marketing and I did sales as a hobby to help the sales team. As you can see, there are 35 deals. This was done in a period of 60 days. All those white cards were my cards. Those are all from HCA facilities to like academic facilities to other hospitals. Okay. That was done not only in 60 days, but we went through VAC committee. I didn't close any of those deals, by the way. I just want to be very clear. Closing deals is not my thing. Packing pipeline is. The reason why I show this is that, and let me stop sharing and come back, is that if you start thinking about how to do things at scale digitally, you do not have to physically be in the hospital. So these limits mean nothing, right? There we go. Let me stop sharing. So
I don't think that's what
Dr.
he
Weitz,
wants, though.
well, his thing is getting access to these hospitals, and this is like a barrier in reps' heads where I can't physically get in the hospital. So if I can't see them, I can't sell them. But I mean, what's your take, Dr. Weitz?
Well, I'm wondering whether Greg means limit on the number of vendors or let's backtrack. So first of all, in order to get the surgeon support, okay, for a totally new device, this comes back to you have to communicate with the surgeon himself. Hey,
Yeah.
I have this new device. These are the reasons that I think it would be useful. And I think that if you use our new device, your outcomes will be better, or it will be at a lower cost to the hospital, or it will be, and you have to have concrete reasons as to why they should adopt your new thing, other than just you have a new thing and you need to meet your numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
If you come to them with, hey, I got a new device, they've heard this before. If you come to them with, I have a new device, and these are the ways in which it's going to help you, your chances just went up. If you are, to come back to Omar's point about the screws, all right, then, how do you differentiate your screw from somebody else's? It's really how you communicate with that physician. What else can I do for you? Hey, doc, I understand that you may want to do more spine cases, and we have this new screw, and I understand that you're already using some screw, but if your hospital will take on using our device, I can help you gain more cases by X, Y, and Z. I know these referral sources, you name it. But
Exactly.
basically, you have to think through, what are you bringing to the table that I should want to go to my hospital and use your device? Now, here's the other part of this, and this is really the reality, because I own my own multi-specialty ASC. And I will tell you that I've had more than my share of physician owners come to me, and other physician non-owners come to me and say, oh, I want to use this latest, greatest thing. Then you find out how much it is, and you go, no. Unless we can negotiate with the person, this company, and we can get it for less, we're not doing that. Or how many of them do we have to stock? Okay. And how often are you actually going to utilize this thing?
Exactly. And I was going to say, as somebody, and this is, I want to ask this from the perspective of a CEO / hospital admin. You said no, and correct me if I'm wrong, because in your mind, you did not see a path to how does this either cut costs or grow our revenue.
Both.
Is that correct?
Absolutely. So, bottom line is, doctors come to hospitals and ASCs all day, every day with the latest, greatest thing. Just like you have to convince that doctor that you're bringing something to the table, all right, that makes them want to use it, they in turn have to go to that hospital and convince the hospital or the ASC. So it's either, hey, come back to the screws or spinal cord stimulator leads. hey, this is less expensive than the competitor, or I think we can negotiate a better rate, particularly if we do more cases. And the rep says that they can help us do more cases. So maybe we can do this on a trial basis. If indeed over the first quarter or first 2 quarters, we see that there's an increase in the number of cases that and more revenue is generated, then okay, we'll use them long term. Can we do this on a trial basis? I mean, there are many ways to skin that cat, but ultimately you have to convince that doctor that they want to go to bat for the hospital, go to bat to the hospital or the ASC, and then that doctor has to have the talking points, okay, probably very similar to the talking points you're going to give them, for what they're going to say to that hospital or ambulatory surgery center. But ultimately, it either has to improve patient care dramatically, it either has to cut costs, or it has to increase revenue. And ideally, the win is the triple of that, where you have all three.
Yeah. No. I have too many tabs going at once, managing all these streams. At some point, this show needs to get sponsored, so I have a producer, and I'm not doing this myself. I'll also have I will have, you mark my word, I will have a ESPN like news level media studio at some point. It's gonna be awesome, just not right now. No, I completely agree. And you know, something I made a little banner. I want to bring this up that I want to highlight, which is as a rep, because a lot of times, like, look, is it nice to be working? Let's say, like for me, when I started my career, when I was a sales rep at the first robotic spine company, yeah, it's great because it's, you know, there's no other robotic spine company, right? So that's really nice. But not every med rep is like that. Sometimes you're a med rep and you're unfortunately working for a company that sells a commodity. And if you're a company that sells a commodity, I guarantee you have a bag full of commodities, 10, 20, 30, 40 SKUs, right? So for a young med rep or even, you know, an establishment, it's like, well, how am I going to do this, you know, in a different way? There are things that you can do outside of your company that productize yourself, where somebody says, yeah, I want to use this product and technology. And part of the reason is that it comes with that person, right? And I think one of those things, again, this is something I think I'm going to include in my current program and just make a small module on it. You know, a lot of physicians don't know much about marketing. And so something very simple that you can learn how to do is go on Facebook, go look at other practices. Let's say you're dealing with spine surgery. Go look at some practices, Facebook pages. You can see their advertising library in other states and cities and be like, oh, these are like the best at advertising. Then look at the surgeon's current market, take some screenshots, make a little report and be like, hey, doctor, I represent this company. This is something I do outside on my own. But I wanted to show you like some examples of like really good ads that are being run on other spine surgery pages. I want to show you what your competitors are running. And then I want to give you some ideas about what you can do. And guess what? In those ads, you might be able to find a way and say, like, here's how you can position your practice, but also use our technology in that positioning, maybe. Like, at least
maybe
that's
it's
something
just a
different.
picture.
Yeah, exactly. It's something, and you can even do that in an average way. You don't have to be a master marketer, but I guarantee you nobody else is doing that, you know?
But Omar, I want to bring up one other point, because we're talking about things you can do and not do that will help convince somebody to use you. And I don't want to forget. Do not be the rep who comes unprepared, particularly if you are doing cases in an operating room. Okay.
Ooh,
there is nothing worse.
Tell us something specifically about that.
There is nothing worse than, hey, I didn't think we were going to need it, so I left it in my car. Or, oh, the other rep has that, bag with that, that type of screw. We'll just run across town and go get it. Okay, we're in an OR and time is money and the patient's asleep. And you're going to tell me that you got to run to your car? Are you kidding? So, and this happens all the time. Okay. Or I didn't know what size, so I brought 3, but the patient's actually 350 pounds and the sizes I brought were all for people between like 170 and 210, because I didn't actually do the homework to understand what the case was, who we were going to do, what the issues could be.
I'm
Don't be
so happy you're
unprepared.
saying this. I'm so happy you're saying this. And you're so right. And I want to, this is actually, so there's I think he might be in your program. I need to check Michael Verdon. So Michael Verdon is a spine surgeon. And I was talking to him about this topic, which is for reps. Sometimes I'll get a call every now and then where reps like, oh, my surgeon was so mean to me today and they yelled at me and everything. I'm not saying that's appropriate, but let me give you like a little perspective so you can be empathetic. As the surgeon, you're getting ready to do surgery on a human life, and that person could die. That person can go into complications. They could sue you. You cannot get paid. There's all these things that are happening. You as the rep, you walk into surgery, the surgery's done, you get paid that day, if not later that week. The surgeon gets paid net 30, net 60, net 90, and the patient might get remitted. There's all these kind of things. So with all of this stress, you better believe they have every right to be a jerk and to yell at you and crack the whip because you're about to do surgery. And to Dr. Weitz's point, be a student of the game. If you don't plan to fail. You can call the circulating nurse the day before and be like, hey, what's the case being done tomorrow? What is the patient like? Getting all this information. So you show up, and this is, I think part of this is also studying like a resident. What are the different things that are in the procedure that can be done? Where can it go wrong? So that way, when something happens, it's like you get to a point where you can project and be like, oh shit, I think this is going to be a complication. And before the surgeon even asks for it, it's like, nope, we already got that ready.
That's what it takes. And that's the difference. And that's what I was getting at, even in terms of my Boston Scientific folks. They knew.
And you picked them over a few other big companies too, right?
Medtronic.
Would you feel comfortable sharing the story as to why, like what happened there and how that went down?
Yeah. So in Baton Rouge, there was Medtronic, ANS, who's now been bought out, but that's neither here nor there. And there was Boston Scientific, all vying for both my cases, but also for my ambulatory surgery center to use their product. And the problem with Medtronic was that and ANS for that matter, they would show up on the day of the trial. They didn't contact the patient ahead of time, even though the patient was scheduled. They'd show up for the trial. They would basically hand you a standard lead instead of saying, oh, I think maybe we should put in a longer lead. I brought an extra, and I would know, let's put in a longer lead. But the Medtronic folks would be like, I only brought this kind of lead with me today. Okay, well, had you talked to me ahead of time and we had a game plan, you would have known what lead to put in. Similarly, in terms of just the customer service of programming the patient, because obviously the device is only as good as the person who programs it. And the Medtronic rep and the ANS rep, but really the Medtronic rep, had the attitude of, oh, you implanted this person, they're done. And we would be like, well, okay, but that when they were sitting on the couch doing nothing, this stimulation worked. But now that their pain is better, they're actually up doing stuff. They're having pain in a different part of their leg. I need you to come back and reprogram them. Or patients would call and have a question and the Medtronic rep wouldn't answer. And so over time, it just became apparent that with Boston Scientific, I had, and again, rep dependent, right? Just happened that I had 2-3 phenomenal reps. Casey Kellett, who retired to have babies. Casey Jenkins, who was one of the reps. And then Will Roundtree, who was the territory manager, okay, who came to do cases with us. The 3 of them were phenomenal. They were attentive. There was, the pre-game plan. All right, hey, Dr. Weitz, I see we're doing this case tomorrow. Tell me a little bit about it. As soon as we scheduled that patient for a trial, they were already talking to the patient. They were talking to us. What do we need to bring for this case? Okay, never got caught with our pants down. And if there was any kind of issue, we think the leads moved, We think that there may be some issue with a battery that needed to be replaced in somebody who is 10 years out. Whatever the issue was, they had a can do, I'm in this with you, because it really will make you look better as a physician and basically take better care of the patients. But I want to come back and talk about the sort of impression, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Doctors like to look good, okay? They don't like to look bad. And ultimately, they are, the face, okay? It doesn't matter that it's a device and the device rep who is supposed to be doing X, Y, or Z is inattentive or ill prepared. It still is the doctor's responsibility. So if you do stuff that makes them look good, their chance of wanting to use you just went way up. On the other hand, if you do stuff that they are kind of doing cleanup on aisle 5, they already are busy enough doing cleanup on aisle 5 from all sorts of other things. They don't need to do this too. So that's the story.
No, that's such a great point. And, I feel like there's certain things like I feel like there has to be some kind of like etiquette of medicine taught to people. A perfect example of this, because he's in the news. And actually, let me create a banner. Hold on. Let's apply to medical sales. Okay, here we go. So I keep seeing the viewer count go up. So I'm like, all right, let's juice this thing more. So Elon Musk is notorious for having these like really insanely high standards. So like at Tesla, what his thing is with senior management is like, I pay you a lot of money. You're not going home early. There's people who are getting paid by the hour who are, manufacturers and laborers and everything. They're here 18, 19 hours a day. I don't care if you sleep in the office. You're staying here so they can literally see you. And so, and his office is actually all glass, so you can see him. He has slept overnight at the facilities just so that the people working sees that he's there with them. And one of the things that I learned early on as a rep was that you look like a jerk when you finish, like the robotics section of the case usually takes, when I was in robotic spine surgery, for a 2-level, it would take, like 30 minutes, maybe, not even. And then we're done. Once it's done, like that part, you're good. And I used to think when I was young and I just started, I was like, oh, well, why should I stay here? I can go do other things. And it wasn't until it took one time for me to realize, oh, I look really bad doing that. Where I think one of my managers said, you stay in the case the whole time. And I told him, I said, yeah, but the surgeon even told me like, oh, if you want to go get lunch or something, go for it. He said, yeah, they said that, but they can't get lunch. Neither can anybody else. Why the hell do you think you get to go and enjoy your lunch while these people are in here in this room? You're going to stay in the goddamn room until it's done. And I'm so happy I learned that, because then you get so much more respect, not only from the surgeon, but the team. The scrub techs and the surgical techs aren't stupid. They know how much money you're making. It only makes them more resentful toward you that you make a bunch of more money and you're in the case for a short amount of time and then you bounce out. Most of the stuff that you want to do, whether it's from the computer or notes, you can do it in the case. You just stay in the case just for the optics of it, to physically be there and present. When people tell you, oh, you should just, it's okay, you don't have to be here, be like, no, I want to stay here, for the case, just in case. So little things like that.
But here's the corollary to that. And this is more applicable in places where you may be covering multiple physicians and multiple hospitals. Okay.
That's different.
Do not show up late to a case. All right. If you have Dr. Jones over here and Dr. Smith over here, you figure out with your other rep friends, okay, for your company, how to be, and my mother's favorite saying in life, how do you dance at 2 weddings with 1 ass? And the answer is you can't.
That's so good. I'm using that. Damn, okay. That is good.
And so, if you know that Dr. Jones is slower than slow, and you're not going to get out of that case on time to be cross town when the other guy starts his case, figure out a solution. Okay? Because if you keep them waiting, it's not going to take long before they're not using you. If
Oh
there's an
man, that's so
alternative.
good. Figure out how to dance at two weddings with one ass. God, that is so good. We got some great comments here. Yeah, Matthew Cameron says it's usually a good sign that you know the rep's name. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true, actually.
And then I can call you out 6
Yeah.
years later, right?
Yeah, that's very important. If people in the hospital know you, even when you're masked up and everything, that's a good sign. Jackie's been a watcher of the show for a while. So Jackie said, "Could Avail help Greg?" My response to Greg would be, "Is the goal to get in the case, or is the goal to reach the doc?" To your point, Omar, use LinkedIn to be creative. Get the doc and have him or her champion to advocate your access. Just one opinion. Totally agree. And actually, Jackie had another great comment. So Jackie said, so most of Jackie says, Jackie Schemberg. Jackie, you got to tell me things so I pronounce your name correctly and I don't fudge it up. But so Jackie says most of my best and most loyal customers have been the ones that I spent the least amount of money on. You don't have to buy your way to hit quota. I totally agree. It's the same with me. And you know what? There are surgeons like that. Bought and paid for by XYZ. Now, let me be clear. There are some surgeons who, when they go up to present at conference, their disclosure slide is it's like fine print on some, and that's, I don't have a problem with that, because if you're a surgeon and if a company wants to pay you money to consult them, sure, that's fine. But there are other surgeons who, in my opinion, all they just want to show up for a free meal. As Dr. White said, they're just trying to get away from their family. And it's so true. And they just stand out. You just they're like just slimy car salesmen. I hate to say that. That's literally the feeling. And I've met a neurosurgeon specifically who is this slimy car salesman feel. And I was like, I don't think I want to invite this guy to dinner. He got invited by somebody else and shows up, and I'm like, man, terrible. All right, we got some more questions. And Dr. Weitz, we're over time. I'm good on time. I want to make sure. Are we good on your time? You're good. That's why I love you. That's why I have you on the show. Okay. Ryan Kelliger. That's a new name. I think I've seen you in the past, Ryan. So Ryan says this is very helpful coming from Dr. Weitz and yourself, Omar. Thank you for doing this live stream. Greatly appreciate it. Hey, absolutely. If you love, if like I mentioned before, and let me pull up the banner. Where is it? I just had this. Here we go. That's one. So for those who are just joining or watching, look, if you're a med rep, you want some help, take advantage of it. Dr. White said it's totally okay. Go ahead and message Dr. Weitz directly on LinkedIn to chat. She'll chat with you directly. And again, if you have a physician who's in private practice, have them go to the practicebuildingmd.com. It's right there at the bottom. Honestly, Dr. Weitz, outside of your private physician group, do you have some courses? Because I was going to say, even though they're for physicians, I feel like some reps would benefit a lot if they just paid and went through some of your courses. Honestly, do you have some courses that are open for anybody to just purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 courses. One is evaluating your best opportunity in negotiating your contract. That really is for the physician who is employed and trying to figure out how to navigate the employed physician arena. It would actually be useful to a rep, because I think you would get an understanding of what physicians are up against. How do they get paid? What are they thinking? How do they negotiate? Where are places that you can find a hole to help them with? I also have a course, How to Start Your Own Practice. And then I have a membership, which is the Private Medical Practice Academy, that really speaks to every aspect of being and running a medical practice. So it doesn't only have to be private practice. That doc who is trying to figure out how to make more out of their opportunity, even in an employed setting, can benefit from that. And so,
Absolutely.
all of those are tools, and I'm happy to discuss the details with anybody who wants to reach out to me, and look at it from the physician perspective. Because I think the one thing, in order to actually be able to become part of the team, as I've been talking about, I think one of the things in terms of making yourself useful and therefore getting this adoption is looking at it from the physician perspective. Okay, because if you can see the way they look at the world, then your chance of actually being able to speak their language is that much greater. Because
Absolutely.
a lot of times I feel like, the rep is having this conversation and the doctor's having this conversation, but
Yeah.
in the end, you both really want the same thing, because you both want to take, as I said earlier, you both want to take care of patients, and you both need the revenue.
Yes. That's
Okay.
so true. But
And
I love this analogy that you're so right about that. You're so
well,
right about that.
and ultimately, think of it this way: as a rep, if that doc doesn't do any cases, if that doc doesn't use your device, if that doc doesn't write your drug, then you're dead in the water. So you really need them. Okay, you need them to go to the hospital and convince the hospital or the ASC to buy your thing as well. Okay, so you need that physician. So then, for an hour plus, we've been talking about, okay, how do I get that physician to want to do that? Well, instead of looking at it from the perspective of, I'm going to do something and convince that doctor to use my thing, why don't you turn around and look at it from the perspective of, what can I do to make this physician's life better? Because then they will be beholden to you and want to make your life better, want to use you, want to support you, right? Because you did something for them, all right? You made their life easier, all right? I'll come back to my Boston Scientific example. I loved doing those cases because I could show up and not feel, oh my God, it's going to be a challenge. I knew it was going to be seamless. It was one less thing for me to have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And if
And
you can make my life easier, I'm going to do it.
it's such a good point. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is just there's so many things that a physician, because again, the more empathetic the salesperson is to what is it like when because it's not just, for the rep, their world is just that case. For the doctor, it's leading up to the case, not only dealing with the patient, but also sometimes their family. I've seen my father have to deal with really combative family members for certain things, right? And then what is it going to be like afterwards? So there's all these things that the physician has to deal with, surgical or not. And so if you're able to be that one thing where it's they don't have to worry about it, they're I don't ever have to worry about this one area, you're good. And something I want to bring up that Dr. Weitz, you keep come back to. By the way, Kelly,
I want
you're
to talk to her.
Yeah, Kelly's question is up next. One key tip I want to bring up, and again, this keeps going back to value adding, and the more as a rep, you can think about, how do I productize myself? The more enjoyable the whole process is. So one great example is productize your own process. For example, one of the things that I did early in my career, and a lot of physicians loved it, is when they adopt my product and they have to go in front of committee, I would turn that into an educational thing and say, hey, doc, I'm sure you've gotten to a lot of technology into the hospital and everything, but do you mind, can I teach you the levers of persuasion around my product? And they would love it, because you don't learn persuasion in residency. So I would take Robert Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion. I teach them that. I show them a mnemonic to remember it. I say, okay, when you talk to them about this slide, these are the principles of persuasions that you want to hit on, so on and so forth. And I've had surgeons come back and say, hey, just through that process, I actually was able to use that in this negotiation, or I did this with the hospital CEO, right? Now, You just made a product without your company, without anything. That's you. That's, you know, so that being said, let me bring up Kelly. So Kelly's a very ambitious, talented new medical sales.
Except, Omar, you disappeared. So hopefully you're going to come back.
So sorry. This is the problem with these Mac Magic Mouses, is that if I press the wrong button, it kicks me out of the Zoom. So let me bring up Kelly's comment. Oh, darn it.
It says, backtracking here a bit, Dr. Weitz.
Yes, can you bring it up? Yeah.
I can read it. Is there ever a scenario where the pre-case questions and communications were bothersome? Or would you say the over-communication is preferred at the beginning with forming new relationships with docs? Absolutely. There is, well, so over-communication and being attentive, being interested, showing that you've done the research, meaning you've read the chart, you've talked to somebody about the patient, you know what you're walking into, really brings a level of comfort to that doctor. And they think to themselves, gee, you know, this person is really interested in my success in this case. Okay. I personally have only had the over communication be an issue once, where it was really that the person was totally clueless and unprepared. You know, if you don't know something, that's totally okay, especially if you're new, it's a new procedure, you don't understand. But if you ask things that are sort of common knowledge or that were available and you just didn't bother to either read about it or look it up, and you should have known, and you keep asking the same question 45 times, if every time we do a case you ask me the same question, what it tells me is you were busy playing Candy Crush while I was giving you the answer during the case. All right. Now, I am notorious for doing a case and having a conversation and talking about, you know, situations like with a spinal cord stimulator. You know, what happens if the lead moves? This is what with a new rep, this is what I would do. And basically try and educate that rep, because the more, you know, I understand that you're not a physician. Physicians understand that you're not a physician. But if you're going to be involved in the patient's care, especially if you're a device rep, there's some expectation that you are going to know at least about your device and how it fits into a patient's care. And so, you know, if you're in an OR and you see that it's an opportune moment, or just ask, hey, can I ask you a question? All right. Ask something that's medically relevant to this case. Learn something. All right. Try and educate yourself as much as possible. And that way, the next time so for example, let's say you do case 1 and you didn't know that having a morbidly obese patient affects the size of the device that you need to bring. Well, you're going to learn that during case 1 because Dr. So-and-so is going to tell you, hey, this is an issue. Okay. So then when you come back to do case number 2 with Dr. So-and-so, you say, so doc, how tall is this patient and how much do they weigh? I want to make sure that I come prepared with the appropriate equipment. They'll go, oh, Kelly was actually listening when I told her that, you know, you totally cool. You didn't know it was your first case, you know, but now she's calling me pre-conference to ask me, or pre-procedure to ask me relevant questions. All right. That goes a long way. So no, there's not too much communication. Just make sure that the communication is appropriate and is something that shows that you're thoughtful, not just that you're not paying attention.
Absolutely. And Kelly, you know, since you're starting to cover cases, Kelly's going to do great, by the way. I just know because she puts so much, she's one of the like younger reps where more of them should learn from her because she's just put so much time and effort studying, training, getting ready. She really takes it seriously. But, Kelly, one piece of advice I'd tell you is that sometimes when you don't know, look for the people who are in the room, right? Because there's going to be a circulating nurse there. There's going to be somebody who's like an OG, like an original gangster who's been doing this for a long time. I would always ask them sometimes. So you're in orthopedics, the guy or gal who does who manages the C arm, who takes
The tech.
the tech. I would ask them like, hey, the guy that I used to work with, his name was Chava. Like, hey, Chava, can I? Is this a good time to ask a question? And he'd be like, no. He's like, right now they're doing on this part of the case. It's like kind of really stressful. He's like, wait like 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll be like, hey, can I ask now? And he's like, yeah, go ahead and ask. And then I'd ask a question. So the art of asking questions, to Dr. Weitz's point, is make it relevant to the case. Don't repeat questions, right? Show that you're paying attention, but also think, this is where when you study cases, and again, there's so much content. Like back in the day, I mean, I have like books on surgery all down there. You can look this up and learn from YouTube, and just it being a case, be like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I saw this one approach to the case this way. I mean, what are your thoughts on it? There's certain parts of the cases that are just so boring. So the surgeon, at least in my experience, loves just wants somebody to ask him something interesting, and not some BS question like, oh, did you see like the game last night, or did you watch this movie? And it's like, no, who gives a shit? Like nobody cares. Nobody cares. Something, few more questions for you, Dr. Weitz.
Okay.
You're gonna be back on the show. You know that, right?
Yep, no
You're
problem.
gonna be back on the show. So Kelly says, she says that's very helpful. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. We appreciate it. Kelly's gonna do great. I think she's over at Stryker. Stryker's lucky to have her. So the question I was gonna ask you, Dr. Weitz, is, in your memory, like, what were the times when, outside of clinical practice and outside like of the job a rep would do, what was something that a rep did that really stuck with you, where you're like, wow, I was not expecting that, like it really impressed you? Did anything kind of come to mind? And if not, that's okay.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, Omar, because
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I understand that, because actually, in terms of stuff that they've done beyond, other than just being, friends. I mean, I ultimately knew all these people. Well, I guess, for example, my daughter actually had a very serious medical illness, and I was, in and out of the practice to take care of her for a couple of weeks at a time, multiple times over, probably a almost 6-month period. And the rep, I'm coming back to my Boston Scientific reps, a spinal cord stimulator trial makes a lot of money for them. And needless to say, during this period of time, my productivity certainly took a hit.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard from them, hey, why are you, doing fewer cases, etc. Quite the opposite. They were always very supportive. How's your daughter, Carrie? What's going on with Carrie? What did the doctor say? Do you think you're going to be able to, get her back to where she was? To the point where, probably 5-7 years later, we were in New York at a bar called Legends, which is the LSU bar, and happened to run into Casey, my Boston Scientific rep, who had retired to have these babies, and my daughter Carrie was there, and the two of them were like, "Oh, I've heard so much about you," because she really had become a family member. So, I don't know that there are specific things above and beyond that I understand the question above and beyond, but really that they were an integral part of my team, and really people that I was eager to see.
You know, that's actually a much better question answer than I was looking for. I was like thinking that you might have had a case where a rep kind of went out of their way to learn about, let's say, how to improve like practice marketing or medical billing or something. But I think that's a much better answer because it shows that the salesperson is very attuned to what's going on in the physician's life and is supportive of it. Um, at least from my career and the one that comes to mind immediately was from where I was able to help a physician, Dr. Qasim Budd, who's an interventional nephrologist. So you and I both know him. When I met him, he was a pretty heavyweight nephrologist at it's a huge hospital in San Antonio, Texas. I can't remember. And so we were trying to get our device in, but at the time I also knew that he wasn't particularly happy with practice. He had expressed that to me, and he had his YouTube channel and everything. So I kind of went out of my way to like send him some things like, hey, you know what, like here's how you can actually like maybe like leave practice. Maybe here's some ways that you can build your content up. Here's what you can do brand wise. And we developed a very, very close relationship to this day. I mean, we talk to each other all the time. Like he sends me pictures of him and his family and what they're up to, and same with me. And I think that's the most important thing, which is being really attuned to what's important to the doctor, because it's very likely it has nothing to do with your business,
Well, and so the corollary to that is doctors are real people with real
Shocker.
lives, right? Shocker, right? With real lives and real stuff going on, and they're not a number. And the less you treat them like a number, or like, oh, you're the fifth orthopod that I'm covering, or the fifth pain doctor that I'm covering, okay, and more like, hey, what's going on in your life, and without being overly personal. I mean, not all doctors are going to be willing to share, but if they're grumpy today, don't assume they're grumpy because of you. Maybe they had a fight with their spouse. Okay.
Yes.
Life happens. And so I have to laugh. I'm going to take a pause here for a second. I'm married to a surgeon, okay, who will shoot me if he ever watches this for what I'm about to tell you. He's scored in the 14th percentile on the psych part of the national boards. All right. I love my husband. We're together 38 years. Okay.
This is the most surgeon thing I've ever heard.
But he has zero EQ. Okay. He just does. It's not his fault. Why am I telling you this? All right. Other than to make everybody laugh, right? It's because, not everybody is going to be forthcoming with their emotions or tell you what's going on with them. And, you may get the talk to the hand, all right, particularly if it's one of these guys who are not particularly great in the EQ department. Understand that it's not because of you. It could be because of you, but 99% of the time it's not. It's because of all those other things. Just like not to ask mommy for something when she has steam coming out of her ears. Learn when's a good time to ask a question. If you made an appointment to see me and I come in, but I've been running late and you get the feeling that I'm frazzled, say to me, hey, how are you doing? Treat me like a human, okay? You may not accomplish in this 5 minutes what you set that appointment up for, right? You may even decide, hey, Dr. Weitz, I see you're having a rough day. We can really reschedule this. It's okay, all right?
Mm-hmm.
At which point I may say, oh, thank you, I just had a fight with my husband and this patient would chewed me out and blah, 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 right? Or they may just say thanks and walk out of the room. But the point is that the fact that you recognize that they're human and that maybe now's not a good time to ask me a question, you can get a much better response.
That's such good advice. And we got one last question to bring up. So Ryan, your question is going to be the final one for tonight. But Dr. Weitz, I love that because there's a saying, I said it once, and then my wife constantly reminds me of it, which is like, you'll get more with patience than with force. And sometimes it's a really powerful bargaining chip. I know sometimes for a rep, it's like you've been trying to get a meeting with a doctor, you finally do, and then you can tell like there's something going on, and there's this tendency where it's like, no, this is my one chance. Reciprocity is a hell of a piece of persuasion, and if you're disciplined enough and human enough to do what Dr. Weiss just said, which is like, hey, looks like it's just not a good day. Look, I totally get it. Why don't we just reschedule it? You'll immediately level up your brand in that person's head because you just did something no rep would do. That's number one. And number two, it's a power move. It's like, hey, today's not a good day. Like, we can just reschedule it. It's a much stronger position than the like needy, annoying rep. Because then at that point, the doctor's like, let me just do this and just get them the hell out of here. Right.
Yeah.
That's why I recommend. Before I bring up Ryan's thing, because this is why I love talking with you, Sandy, is that you always there's things that you remind me of that like I haven't thought of in a long time. Can I share a great story of two surgeons with polar opposite reactions? So, when I was younger, when I started out, when I started in this industry, I was just out of med school, and I was like, I think 26 years old. But I might as well have been like 21 or 19 because I'd never worked. I never had a career like up until that point. So it was like I was 19 years old. And with one surgeon who I covered, there was something going on. I don't know what it was. And I won't say the surgeon's name, but I was like, hey, Dr. So-and-so. I was like, I hope you don't mind me asking. I was like, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself today and stuff. And the guy turned around and he's like, you know what? I really appreciate you asking that. Like, and he had some issue, like legal issue with the patient. And he was like, he talked it out with me. He's like, Omar, thank you so much for asking. And that felt great. So then I said, hey, I should do that more often. So without thinking too much about it, I'm like, there's this other surgeon, and so a few months later, there's another surgeon I was covering who just looked like he was in a bad mood. And I should have known better. Because I knew how the surgeon would have reacted, but I was just like, no, I should do that. Let me do that move. I was a young guy. I was like, I didn't think much. And I asked him, I was like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, like, is everything okay? Like, you don't seem like yourself today. And I kid you not, he's at the scrub sink, and he like another, it was a surgical tech was standing by, just kind of like sitting back, and kind of looked at him, and the guy like was like scrubbing it, and he looked around, he's like, Omar, I'm not myself today. Can I open up to you a little bit? And I got so excited. I was like, yeah, no, doctors, absolutely, you can talk to me. And he's like, what the hell do you think this is? Do you think this is effing therapy? He's like, get the hell out of here. He just totally mopped the floor with me. And like, he said something, he's like, what are you, an effing psychiatrist? He's like, the here. Like, it was, and like everybody had a good laugh. I was so embarrassed by it. But my point is that's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean like, don't try again. Cause I still continue to do that with other surgeons. I just got a lot better about picking the right ones.
Know your audience.
With this one, I was just like, I knew it in the back of my head. See, use your intuition. My intuition said, don't do that. My ego was like, this would be a great idea. Do it. This guy will be your best friend. Definitely not. Ryan Gallagher, you are the last question of the night. Ryan says, what is the best piece of advice in creating a relationship with a doctor along with the practice staff for the first time, especially if you're new to the territory? Great question, Ryan. Dr. Weitz, what's your suggestion to Ryan?
So Ryan, I think we've already talked about how do you get in front of the doctor if you're not going to their office, in terms of reaching out to them through social media outlets, reaching out to them through, a handwritten note. But everybody knows that the key to actually getting something done is the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to sound bad, but they love stuff. Okay. And they do. All right. And sure, maybe It may be pens. It
Should I
may
make
be
a banner? Should I make a banner like pro tip, staff love stuff?
yes. Well,
But
hold on
keep,
for a second.
yeah, go. Sorry.
So, yes, and don't bring them brochures. And yes, stuff like pens, stuff like stress balls, stuff like mouse pads. Okay. Those are things that people at the front desk eat up. But you may not have the budget for that, especially if you're a new guy in town. So here's a cheap tip. If you have a Costco membership or a Sam's Club membership, or you know somebody who does, go buy industrial bags of candy. Go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Okay. Get cellophane bags. Fill the cellophane bags with candy. Get a cute ribbon. Slap your card or preferably a sticker to the bag and bring it to the front desk. Okay. Bring a couple. The girls will love it. Sorry, sexist comment, but they're usually women. All right.
Yeah, no, don't worry. This is the right show to make those kind of comments. We try and keep it real.
Well, but it's the truth. And that front desk is usually who is going to help you negotiate. You ultimately want to get to the practice manager. Okay. But the practice manager is not nearly as obstructionist, or there's not as much of a hassle to get to a practice manager as there is to get to the doctor. So if you can win the front desk over with candy to get you to an appointment with the practice manager, that's really your opportunity to say, hey, to the practice manager, hey, I'm the new guy in town, really would like to meet with Dr. So-and-so or doctors so-and-so. This is what I think I can do for your practice. And present to the practice manager, who is really the gatekeeper, what you can do and see if they will allow you to make that appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh earlier, but no, it is true. But couple points is one is, like there's a treasure trove of information and intelligence data at your fingertips, and you don't use it. So with the practice team, like you have one shot really to make an impression, right? And so you could get something from your company or do something more personable, like what Dr. Weitz mentioned. Every single one of these practice managers and staff, at least one of them is going to have an Instagram. Go look them up on Instagram. You're going to find out very quickly, like, oh, they're into these things. Go look at the practice's Instagram page. I guarantee you they're going to have some pictures from some holiday parties. You'll be able to point out, be like, oh, that box of donuts. Okay, I could see that's not a Dunkin' Donuts thing. That's some local place. Let me get it from there. The other thing you can do is look for the doctor when you start in a new territory, Ryan. There, and I got to give a shout out to Dr. Ira Kirschenbaum who said this, and it's a great tip. There are two groups of people who know everything about the doctor, or at least a surgeon: the reps and the nurses. Go talk to other reps; they'll tell you, right? And just get information, right? It's kind of like I can't overemphasize this. There's a theme here, what Dr. Weitz is saying, what I'm saying. The more you spend time thinking about what you're going to do, what you're going to say, getting the data, getting the information. Okay, I'm going to go to this practice. If they open the doors and the staff is going to talk to me, and then they say, oh yeah, the doctor's in the back, why don't you talk to them now? What are you going to say? What are you going to present? Like, you have to have all this planned out. You can't just go in and wing it, right? The reps who do this succeed. The ones who don't end up being a royal pain, and they're the complete opposite of the theme of the show, which is how do you become valuable?
Well, and a couple of follow-ups to that, and then I'll let you guys go. But number one, please and thank you go a long way. So, the front office staff, the practice manager, you really want to be respectful. Please and thank you. If you're sitting in the waiting room waiting for somebody to see you, the practice manager or the doctor, don't be talking on your phone. Don't be like sitting there as if you own the place. When you're taken to the back, to meet with somebody, don't spread your stuff out all over the nurse's station, or, kind of hang out and be one of the buds. You're not a bud, right? Especially if you're brand new, you're not a bud, right? And if they're helpful, to you, or they're helpful to you, follow up with a thank you. Shoot them a message again through LinkedIn, Facebook Messenger, handwrite them a note. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I'm really, and then if you have a discussion with them about what you're going to bring to this table, all right, follow it up with, as we talked about, these are the action items. This is what I'm going to do to follow through on what we discussed, right? Because we talk to a lot of people, we being physicians, who want to sell us something, who blow smoke up our butts, and they don't actually deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are polite, clear in what you're offering, and then you follow up, that's the win.
I completely agree. Dr. Weitz, thank you so much for spending this much time with us. Me personally, I really appreciate it. I know the reps do. We have a lot of people who are watching. It's amazing. I may have broken a new viewer count tonight, so I love that. But with that being said, Dr. Weitz, stay on for just a second, as we sign off. But for those who are watching, here we are. Be sure to tell your physicians to go check out the Practice Building MD. MD is a medical doctor, so the practicebuildingmd.com. That's Dr. Weitz's website on the business of medicine. She has great courses on there. She has amazing private community of private practice physicians, where they learn everything you should have learned in residency that you did not learn, right?
Exactly.
And again, if you're a medical rep, take advantage of this. I'm telling you, and this is she insisted. If you need some help, send Dr. Weitz a message on LinkedIn. She'll be happy to chat with you. This episode, I'm going to go ahead and throw it up on the podcast as well. You can watch this again on LinkedIn. It's on YouTube and Twitter as well. But with that being said, Dr. Weitz, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for the great questions.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I know. There we go. Dr. Ryan says, thank you, Dr. Weitz and Omar, about the pre-planning, being kind, and coming with a resourceful purpose for the practice. Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Hey, look, best thing, take these ideas, like steal them, make them yours, go put them into practice, and then come back. Let me and Dr. Weitz know how it works for you, okay? Exactly. All right, everyone. Take care and have a good night.